Within just 1 hour of booting up the Outer Worlds, the player is met with their first moral dilemma of this space adventure. So there you are, trapped on the hostile planet of Terra 2, and the only chance of escape is to recover a power regulator to juice up your ship. And it just so happens that there are 2 of these modules available on this vibrant world, but the only way to recover one of them is to doom one of 2 communities. So in this video, I want to break down the game's first major choice by analyzing and detailing the 2 potential outcomes that can occur, and how relatively quickly or drawn out this process can be depending on the player's will. Also, I'll conclude by exploring some alternative routes in which I try to complete the quest in ways not intended by the developers in order to test the level of player freedom. So without further ado, let's dissect the Outer Worlds' first moral dilemma. So after creating your ideal space adventurer, a scientist named Phineas Wells blasts you downwards to the planet of Terra 2, where his companion, Alex Hawthorne, is waiting to escort you from planet to planet in order to aid Wells in his mission to bring freedom to the Halcyon colony. But, unfortunately for Hawthorne, your escape pod crushes him, and it's up to you to become the new captain of the unfortunate your new spaceship. After dealing with some local marauders, the player learns that the only way to get the ship off the ground is to recover a power regulator from the nearby town of Edgewater. Here, the player is introduced to Reed Thompson, Edgewater's outpost administrator, and he informs you that while you can't have his power regulator, you can find one in the nearby botanical gardens that are, as he puts it, mostly abandoned. It is here where the player is first made aware that they're entering a morally gray zone. Reed is asking you to cut off the power to an area where a group of Edgewater deserters have made home and started a community for themselves. Reed is clearly self-interested and outright admits that by cutting off their power, you're not only freeing up their power regulator, but also ensuring that the occupants will have no choice but to return to their jobs at Edgewater, which he believes will make the town run smoothly once again. Before cutting off the power, Reed implores you to make a trip to the Botanical Gardens to visit the people, led by a scientist named Adelaide, and tell them that this is their last chance to return before the power is cut. Following the handy quest marker leads to Adelaide's encampment, where she explains that life in Edgewater is on the brink of collapse, and that the company running it, Spacer's Choice, really doesn't care about its people. She describes her small community as being full of people who didn't fit in Edgewater, and chose to leave it behind, instead of enduring its bureaucratic ways. She tells you that by shutting off power to the gardens, her community will be doomed, and instead asks you to cut off power to Edgewater, ensuring that her people can continue to thrive. And after concluding the discussion with Adelaide, the player is now fully introduced to the moral dilemma and the consequences of their choice. Video games have a unique ability to explore human morality in ways that other mediums simply can't. Movies, books, and television shows have to be predetermined with a beginning, middle, and end, and the viewer's inputs and desires and emotions can no way influence the outcome of these entertainment sources. But for video games, that isn't necessarily the case. Sure, the player's freedom does have limitations, but developers can set players up with the tools and opportunities to shape the narrative how they see fit, and this opening section of the Outer Worlds proves it. The developers at Obsidian have now put the player into this situation where their choices have real and meaningful consequences for the world around them, yet indecision isn't an option. A choice must be made in order to progress. And what's brilliant about this title is not only that the player is forced to make a tough choice, but also that there is a high level of freedom to inform that choice. So, how does that take shape? Well, after talking to Adelaide, the player is now free to head straight to the geothermal lab where they can redirect the power to one of the two settlements if they've decided that they've seen enough and are ready to make the tough choice. After completing a short dungeon, the player is faced with a terminal that allows them to redirect power to either Edgewater or the Botanical Gardens. The choice here is final. Once you select where the power goes, that's it. There's no reversing your decision. If you're a player who wants to just get through the game quickly and experience just the main story, you are absolutely free to do that with nothing in your way. The game does a good enough job of giving you a basic understanding of the two communities so that your choice isn't a shot in the dark. Reed informs you that Edgewater is run under the control of a company called Spacer's Choice, and that the people here are placed into jobs and are expected to complete those jobs diligently. Thompson views his community as a place where people are given a role and a chance to fit in, which isn't available anywhere else nearby on Terra 2. Meanwhile, Adelaide tells you that Edgewater is a miserable place where folks are mistreated and brainwashed, and the player can tell that both her and Reed's views on Edgewater are legitimate even if they are polar opposites. This information alone is enough to inform your choice. Do you side with the repressive city of Edgewater, where a majority of the people living within Emerald Vale live, or do you side with the free outpost at the Botanical Gardens, where just a few people live in peace? Even without experiencing any other content, the choice is still difficult: to doom the repressed many, or to doom the free few. This conundrum will get many players, myself included, to desire more information about the situation, and as previously mentioned, one of the best parts of this game is that you're free to do that in spades. A lot of people enjoy these types of games because of their role-playing nature. It is completely up to you to roleplay or not, and if you choose to do so, you're free to invent any backstory you want for your character and give them the stats, the skills, the perks, and the playstyles to reflect that past. For instance, my character on the first playthrough was a genius from Earth with a sharp tongue, a good heart, and a feel for long guns and heavy weaponry. He relies mostly on his ability to talk his way out of situations and has a heavy desire to gather as much intel as possible. However, if combat does break out, his weaponry is ready to do the talking for him. This is of course just one of the many different kinds of characters that players can roleplay as, and their choices for how to engage with this particular moral dilemma can be a reflection of their character's backstory. For me, my character seeks as much information as possible, as a genius naturally would. This meant that for me, the choice of who to save and who to doom was so much more than a way to advance the plot, but instead a decision that needed careful consideration. Before making the choice, I decided it would be wise to investigate both the Botanical Gardens and Edgewater to learn more about its denizens and their lifestyles. Starting in Edgewater, I went around searching for NPCs with names and struck up conversations with them to get a feel for this rundown city. The game's branching dialogue options are incredible, as players can get straight to the point if they want, but are also free to explore a full range of dialogue paths to better understand not only the environment that they're in, but also the unique personality of each NPC. I was blown away by how this one NPC, the local bartender, had such a fleshed out backstory and personality despite the fact that she isn't tied to any part of the main quest or the side quests. She dreamed of growing up to be a scientist, but upon arriving in Edgewater, it was determined that her best role would be as a bartender, and so that's what she was forced to do. She has no choice but to provide drink for the citizens, and it's clear that she is regretful of how her life has turned out. Remember, this dialogue isn't a part of any quest, it's just sitting here waiting for a player to uncover if they are willing to take the time to learn about the town. Discovering it feels natural because there isn't a quest marker attached to it. It enhances the role playing, and it's a major strength of this title. And the best part about that is that many of the NPCs function in that way, and only after exhausting their dialogue do side quests unveil themselves. For example, the player can help the local gravedigger collect debts, which in turn leads the player to discovering 2 more side quests, one to help an old man find medicine, the other to help a partially crazed general uncover the potential plot of a robot takeover. All of these quests are multi-staged and contain their own narratives with smaller choices to make throughout, but the best part about them is that they flesh out Edgewater and give you a better understanding of the side Reed doesn't want you to know about. Truly, the side quests stand out on their own, but also do their role in fleshing out the main story, and that two-sided nature of them is awesome. And eventually, it becomes clear through dialogue that the people of Edgewater aren't really viewed as people at all, but instead, property of Spacer's choice. People who are sick with the plague aren't treated unless they reach a certain value threshold to the community. People don't get to choose what jobs they have. People are forced to endorse and consume only Spacer's choice products, which in this town, salt tuna is produced for the company. And guess what? This tuna is fake and gross. And finally, the most damning piece of evidence against Edgewater is that when a man commits suicide, it's viewed as vandalism, a destruction of company property that must be repaid by the person's closest living relative. It's horrifying, and it paints Edgewater as a terrible place to live, and all of this is unveiled through doing the side quests. All of these factors make Edgewater seem like a shithole, and so it only feels natural to cut the power there. But upon further introspection, you realize that by cutting the power here, the already wretched lifestyle these people must endure will only be made worse. It's easy to assume the mindset that you're helping these people by freeing them, but ultimately, you are taking away their agency if you decide to doom the town, and is it really your job to play God? Some of these people are content and happy to live in a town with a steady income and a safe place to call home. And is it really okay for you to take that away from them in the name of supposed liberation? Well, maybe it's best to investigate the Botanical Gardens a bit first as well. So you head over there and can pick up some more side quests that reveal this small settlement is filled with people who care about one another. Thomas, the local wannabe engineer, wants so desperately to give back to the people who took him in, and entrusts you with finding engineering textbooks to help him learn the trade. Another citizen asks you to track down a girl named Zoe, who has gone missing from camp, and many of its folks are concerned about her. It paints a picture of a community that cares about each other. However, Adelaide does make it clear that she doesn't intend to allow every single person from Edgewater to live here if you take away their power, and so the dilemma is still left to exist. Completing all the side quests in Edgewater and the Botanical Gardens takes you on some great adventures with action along the way, and it paints a clear picture of both of these communities. However, no side quest ever trivializes the choice at hand or makes it obvious on what the right and wrong choice are. It may push you in certain directions, but it never robs the choice from having meaning and consequences, which is the sign of an outstanding quest design. From here, it's time to face that terminal we discovered earlier and make a choice, to either juice up Edgewater or the Botanical Gardens. If you've brought a companion with you, they may share their 2 cents on the matter at hand, which aids again in fleshing out their believability as a character. So, on my first playthrough of this area, I elected to redirect power to the Botanical Gardens and doom Edgewater. The choice wasn't easy, but I bet on the human spirit to adapt and overcome to any situation, and entrusted that the people of Edgewater would find their way. Spacer's Choice seemed like a company filled with a bunch of assholes, and it only felt right to halt their production and bottom line, at least at this facility. And now, it was time to uncover the consequences of my actions. Returning to Edgewater, the player finds that the music's tone has shifted into a somber setting. The power is out, and the people are knocking at Reed's doors to get answers on what will happen next. Only the town's security forces keep them at bay. Entering the Saltuna plant, it's clear that production has completely stopped, and an enraged Reed tells you that you've doomed not only him, but the many, many people who live in his town. The player is forced to see the consequences of their action, as it's impossible to avoid talking to Reed here. He informs you that a team of Space Marines is awaiting your arrival at the power regulator and have been commanded to shoot you on sight. Killing them is the only way to collect the regulator, and once you have it, you can power up your ship and get the hell off this planet. Before doing that though, returning to the Botanical Gardens reveals a community in bliss, and they have a full charge of power now that will enable the people to increase production, grow their numbers, and increase their odds of survival. Adelaide thanks you and reveals that she hates Edgewater so much because Reed chose to not administer her son medicine when he was sick, and he died as a result of it. This may give the player some comfort, but the fact remains, you've dramatically altered people's lives, some for the better and some for the worst. But at least you made the right choice. Right? Booting up another character, the player can answer exactly that by returning to the terminal and instead choosing to reroute power back to Edgewater and dooming the Botanical Gardens. A lot of the same scenarios play out initially, but the quest takes a completely different turn in its ending. Returning to Edgewater, Reed thanks you for directing the power to them and asks when he can expect the deserters at the Botanical Gardens to come back to their posts. He asks you to make contact with them once again and implore them to return. Doing just that, the player can pick up the power regulator right then and there after a short discussion with Adelaide, who is pissed at you for settling with the corporate bigwigs. Fleshing out her dialogue, though, reveals a grim reality that the player didn't uncover by making the opposite choice. Adelaide reveals that she's only been able to revive the dead soil by chopping up humans and using the remains as fertilizers. This once grandmotherly figure is seen in a much darker light as she unveils she's been stealing bodies from Edgewater's cemetery to grow her crops. It's very unsettling, but she tells the player she's only going to come back to the city if Reed isn't there, and she doesn't care how you make this happen. You can talk him into leaving or kill him outright. Returning to Edgewater allows you to do just that, ensuring that Adelaide will take over Edgewater and perhaps make things better for everyone by bringing more food and medicine to the city. Sure, the player kinda has to accept the whole abuse of dead bodies thing, but all in all, both the people of Edgewater and those of the Botanical Gardens have a chance at a better life with Reed and Spacer's Choice out of the picture. Dooming the Botanical Gardens may have had the unintended effect of actually saving and liberating the most amount of people and setting them up with the best possible survivability odds. After exploring both of these intended routes though, I wondered, is it possible to break the quests and complete it in non-traditional ways? I decided to test a few possibilities to see if it were possible. First, I decided to see if I could just simply sneak my way into the gardens or Saltuna factory and pilfer the power regulator without ever speaking to anyone. As cool as this would have been for players who were role-playing with a stealth element defining their character, it isn't possible. Both devices still have power running through them until you divert one, meaning that touching it gets you zapped. From there, I thought, what if we redirect the power without ever meeting Reed or Adelaide? So I went straight to the geothermal center, only to discover a locked door that I couldn't get through without the password from Reed. So I thought of a new approach: kill Reed on sight. The game actually does permit this to happen, although you have to do it with a ranged weapon before you're forced into his dialogue. Killing him makes him drop a key that can be used to access a terminal with the passcode to the geothermal plant. From there, you can redirect power to the gardens, return to Edgewater, and grab the Regulator, and never set foot in the Botanical Gardens if you so choose. So in terms of going against the grain, the game doesn't give true player freedom, and I think that's something we're still waiting for games to do, allowing us to go against quest markers and find solutions that the developers didn't intend. Sure, it's happened in some games already, but I hope it's something we see more of in the next generation. So of course, no matter what choice you make, you won't know what could have been until a subsequent playthrough, but regardless, the beauty of this title is that its choices have repercussions that the player will miss dialogue and outcomes based on the choices they make. At the same time, the player is given plentiful amounts of opportunities to inform their decisions in order to make the choice that best aligns with the role that they've set for their character. While the player isn't free to approach this opening dilemma in literally any way possible, what's here is still very robust and fleshed out, which deserves a lot of credit. And to be honest, at the time of writing this, I'm only about 12 hours into the Outer Worlds, so I can only hope choices like this persist throughout the title. But if this opening is any indication for what's to come, it's safe to say we're safe in Obsidian's hands. So here we are at the end of another video, and I hope you enjoyed this look at the Outer Worlds' first major moral dilemma and how wonderfully the game marries its side quests with main quests in order to set players up to make the most informed choices that they can. If you enjoyed this video, consider checking out some of my other content on the channel. I do mostly reviews and a series called Psychology of Gaming. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more, check me out on Twitter @NopeNatNarp, and as always, have a nice day, and take care.